A signal has been broadcasting on shortwave frequency 4,625 kilohertz from somewhere in Russia since at least the early 1980s, a monotonous buzzing tone repeating roughly 25 times per minute, 24 hours a day, occasionally interrupted by a voice reading Russian names and numbers before the buzz resumes. Hundreds of stations like this one have been tracked across the globe for decades, all broadcasting spoken number sequences on fixed schedules to unknown recipients. No government has ever officially claimed a single one. Then the FBI found the decryption keys. The same shortwave frequencies that intelligence agencies first used to reach agents in the field during World War I would eventually carry the most unbreakable communication system in the history of espionage. But when coded radio messages first appeared on the airwaves, the technology was simply the only thing that could reach someone behind enemy lines. During World War II, the British Special Operations Executive went further, embedding coded phrases inside the BBC's regular European broadcasts to signal French resistance operatives in occupied territory. And then the Cold War arrived, and the format matured into what hobbyist radio monitors now recognize as the modern numbers station, a dedicated, scheduled, shortwave broadcast built around a specific cipher, operated by intelligence services on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Western agencies, including the CIA and Britain's MI6, and Eastern Bloc services, including the Soviet KGB and East Germany's Stasi, all independently built and ran stations of this type during the period. The reason every one of them converged on shortwave radio comes down to atmospheric physics. Shortwave signals, in the range of roughly 3 to 30 megahertz, reflect off the Earth's ionosphere, which means a single transmitter can be picked up by a receiver thousands of miles away. That receiver doesn't need to be anything special. A cheap, commercially available shortwave radio, the kind you could buy in any electronics shop during the Cold War and still can today, is enough. No satellite dish, no internet connection, no specialized device that could be seized or searched or subpoenaed by a foreign counterintelligence service. That's the delivery mechanism. The cipher riding on top of it is called a one-time pad, a randomly generated encryption key used exactly once, at least as long as the message it encrypts. In 1949, the mathematician Claude Shannon published a paper titled Communication Theory of Secrecy Systems, in which he proved that a properly used one-time pad achieves what he called perfect secrecy. That proof means the encrypted broadcast gives an interceptor zero information about the original message, regardless of how much computing power they throw at it, now or at any point in the future. The security doesn't depend on computational difficulty, it depends on information theory itself, which means faster computers don't help because there's nothing to compute against. The practical catch, though, is that the pad has to be truly random. It can never be reused, and it can never be physically captured by the other side, because the moment any of those conditions breaks, the entire system collapses. When you combine those two things, you get a communication channel with a very specific property that no other technology has ever matched for espionage. The broadcast goes out over public airwaves that anyone with a $20 radio can receive, but only the person holding the matching one-time pad can read the actual message. And because the signal is one way, there's no return transmission to trace, no metadata, no login credentials, no digital fingerprint tying the listener to the sender. An intelligence officer sitting in an apartment in Washington or London or West Berlin can tune in on a cheap commercial radio, copy down the number groups, decode the message with a disposable pad, and burn both the pad and the notes in a kitchen sink. And there's one more feature of this system that made it practically untouchable from a legal standpoint. Because the broadcasts go out over open public airwaves, and because the signal is one way with no return transmission, simply owning a shortwave radio or even being caught listening to a number station is not evidence of anything. A prosecutor can't prove you were listening for intelligence purposes rather than out of curiosity, and they can't prove you decoded anything unless they physically recover the one-time pad or the decryption software. The whole security model depends on that gap. The only thing that breaks it is the pad itself being captured, reused, or generated improperly, which is exactly how the real cases that proved all of this eventually came apart. But for decades before those arrests, all of this was educated speculation supported by consistent circumstantial evidence and nothing else. The stations kept broadcasting, anonymous and unclaimed, and hobbyist shortwave monitors around the world kept logging them. Groups like the European Numbers Information Gathering and Monitoring Association, known as Enigma, built classification databases for the stations and assigned them designator codes, tracking their broadcast schedules and signal characteristics the way birdwatchers catalog migration patterns. One of the most well-known was a station that enthusiasts called the Lincolnshire Poacher, designated E03 in the monitoring community's classification system. It broadcast an English-accented voice reading 5-digit number groups, and before every transmission it played 2 bars of the English folk tune The Lincolnshire Poacher as its interval signal. Amateur radio direction finding, not any official confirmation, pointed the transmitter to RAF Akrotiri, a British military base on the island of Cyprus, and the station was widely believed to be operated by Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. The UK government never confirmed any of it, and the station ceased broadcasting in July 2008, with the final recorded transmission logged by independent monitors on June 29th of that year. It had a sister station nicknamed Cherry Ripe, after another English folk song, which continued broadcasting after the poacher went dark and later moved its signal to Australia around September 2009. Then there's UVB-76, the station from the opening of this video, known to listeners as the buzzer. That monotonous signal on 4,625 kilohertz has been running continuously since at least the early 1980s, with the earliest confirmed recording dating to 1982. It's widely believed to be linked to the Russian military, though Moscow has never confirmed that either. Competing theories about its purpose include a channel marker meant to keep the frequency reserved and unusable by other broadcasters, a readiness check for personnel at military receiving stations, and the most dramatic claim that it's a component of a nuclear dead hand trigger system. Multiple sources point out that the station went briefly silent on several documented occasions, including a full 24-hour gap in December 2010 without any resulting escalation, which makes that last theory difficult to support. But here's a detail that most people outside the shortwave monitoring world don't know about. In mid-January 2022, hobbyist pirates actually managed to hijack the open frequency for several days, broadcasting internet memes over it, including the song Gangnam Style and images that were only visible when the audio was processed through a spectrum analyzer, before the frequency returned to its normal broadcast pattern. As of 2026, the station is confirmed still active, and reporting connected to the ongoing war in Ukraine has noted renewed voice message activity on the frequency. A more unsettling station was one known as the Swedish Rhapsody, designated G02, which was operated by Polish intelligence. It broadcast in German, and its interval signal was a music box melody originally thought to come from Hugo Alfvén's Swedish Rhapsody No. 1, though at least one source disputes that identification and suggests the tune was actually the Luxembourg polka. The voice reading the numbers was high-pitched and eerie, and listeners for years assumed it was a live child speaking into a microphone somewhere in Eastern Europe. It wasn't a child at all, but an electromechanical device called a Sprach-Morse generator, a speech Morse generator, built by the East German Stasi. The station ceased broadcasting on April 9, 1998. And then there's the station that connects this entire subject to a federal courtroom. Attention, designated HM01, a Spanish-language number station broadcasting from Cuba. Every transmission opened with the word "attention," followed by blocks of number groups, and it was used by Cuba's Directorate of Intelligence to send coded instructions to intelligence officers operating inside the United States. That station is reported still active as of 2025. But Cuba's Intelligence Directorate wasn't just running a radio station. They were running people on American soil. And on September 12, 1998, the FBI caught them. On that date, the FBI arrested 10 people in South Florida as part of a Cuban intelligence network known as La Red Avispa, the Wasp Network. 5 of the 10, Gerardo Hernandez, Ramon Labanino, Antonio Guerrero, Fernando Gonzalez, and René Gonzalez, became known as the Cuban Five and contested the charges. The remaining 5 cooperated with prosecutors. When agents searched the network's equipment, they recovered one-time pad decryption software and keys. And with those keys, investigators matched already recorded attention broadcasts to specific decoded messages containing actual operational instructions. In that single arrest, a station that had been broadcasting anonymously for years was tied directly on the U.S. federal court record to decoded espionage communications. The Wasp Network case was the first time in public record that the link between a numbers station and a real intelligence operation was proven with physical evidence in a courtroom, not inferred by enthusiasts pointing directional antennas at suspected transmitter sites, but documented with recovered decryption keys and the plain text messages they produced. The case was later dramatized in the 2019 Netflix film Wasp Network. 3 years later, on September 21, 2001, just 10 days after the September 11th attacks, the FBI arrested Anna Belen Montes. She was a senior Cuba analyst at the United States Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, where she had worked since 1985, and she was charged with conspiracy to commit espionage on behalf of Cuba. She received her coded instructions from Havana through shortwave radio broadcasts of number sequences, which she decrypted using software on a personal laptop. She pleaded guilty in 2002 and was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Montes acknowledged disclosing the identities of 4 undercover American intelligence agents to Cuban intelligence, and prosecutors stated at the time that those 4 agents were not harmed. She was released early in January 2023, after roughly 20 years served, based on good behavior credit. And the reach of number stations in confirmed espionage operations wasn't limited to Cuba. On June 27, 2010, the FBI arrested 10 people, including Anna Chapman, as deep-cover Russian intelligence operatives working for Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, in an operation the Bureau internally called Ghost Stories. This ring is primarily remembered for its other tradecraft, private Wi-Fi networks set up in coffee shops and hotel lobbies, classified information hidden inside the pixel data of ordinary digital photographs posted online, messages written in invisible ink, and identical bags swapped between operatives on park benches and busy sidewalks. But government records and independent monitoring sources both confirm that shortwave radio and coded number transmissions were also among the methods used by members of the broader network. The 10 were deported to Russia in a prisoner exchange on July 9, 2010, just 12 days after their arrest. And then there's a chapter of this story that nobody saw coming. In 1997, a man named Joaquin Fernandez, the founder of a small UK record label called Urdial Discs, released a compilation titled The Conet Project, Recordings of Shortwave Number Stations. It was a 4-CD set containing roughly 150 recordings he'd made starting in 1992, capturing the actual sounds of these broadcasts as picked up on his own radio equipment. A reissued 5-CD edition followed in 2013, with the 5th disc adding 26 previously unreleased recordings of what are classified as noise stations. The compilation became the definitive public archive of number station audio, the largest single collection of these recordings in existence. And in a development that connects Cold War espionage to the world of American indie rock in a way absolutely no one predicted, the Grammy-nominated band Wilco sampled recordings from the Conet Project on their 2002 album Yankee Hotel Foxtrot without obtaining permission from the label. Urdial Discs sued Wilco over the unlicensed use, and Urdial won. An obscure spy radio archive label taking a Grammy-nominated rock band to court over samples of Cold War number broadcasts and coming out on top. You might reasonably assume that in an era of encrypted messaging apps and end-to-end encrypted email services, shortwave number stations would have gone extinct decades ago, but they haven't, and the evidence suggests they aren't going anywhere. Multiple sources from 2025 and 2026 confirm that number stations are still operating. UVB-76 is still transmitting on 4,625 kilohertz from Russia. A Cuban station under the HM01 Attention designation is still broadcasting. Other Russian language and Spanish language stations continue to be tracked by volunteer monitoring groups. The reason they persist is the same property that made them useful in 1965. A shortwave broadcast requires no server that can be subpoenaed, no account that can be compromised, no device fingerprint that can be traced, and generates no metadata that proves who received the signal. Every internet-based communication system, regardless of how strong its encryption is, requires a connected device at the receiving end, and every connected device generates logs, metadata, and forensic traces that a counterintelligence service can seize and examine. A $20 shortwave radio, tuned to a public frequency, sitting on a shelf next to a dozen other household electronics, is not the kind of evidence that holds up in any courtroom on Earth. The ongoing monitoring of these stations is maintained today by volunteer enthusiast organizations, primarily Enigma 2000, which is the successor to the original Enigma monitoring group, and the online tracking platform Preom.org. These groups log broadcast schedules, identify new stations when they appear, and catalog changes in existing ones, maintaining what amounts to a public television guide for active shortwave espionage traffic. They've been doing this for decades, building a record that is more comprehensive and more publicly accessible than anything any intelligence agency has ever released. Because no intelligence agency has released anything at all, these broadcasts have been recorded, cataloged, decoded in federal courtrooms, and connected to confirmed espionage operations spanning multiple decades and at least 3 countries. The court record settled the question of whether numbers stations are real intelligence communication tools in 1998 when the FBI decoded Attention, and settled it again in 2001 when Montes was arrested with the decryption software on her laptop. What the court record didn't settle, and what no government appears willing to address, is what's being transmitted right now, tonight, on shortwave frequencies that anyone with a $40 radio can tune into, in messages that no amount of computing power on Earth will ever be able to read.